Almost 3 years ago, this small bathroom in my home went through some really big changes. The first thing that I did was rip out this old flooring, and then everything got a nice new fresh coat of paint. And then I laid some new flooring down in the bathroom, like the rest of my home, added some trim around the window and an accent wall, and then I painted the vanity, and this was how it turned out. But I think we can still make some really big changes that are going to upgrade this bathroom even more. Before we jump into the bathroom, I want to tell you guys about today's sponsor, Treat Life, and their security camera. So my kids, I don't know if you guys have this issue, but they leave the garage door open all the time after they've gone out to play, and I'm constantly having to check to see if it's open or closed. So I want to use a security camera in my garage. It can be used inside or outside. If you use it outside, it is resistant to rain, snow, sun, so it's extremely easy to set up. All you have to do is screw the mount into the wall, which is just 2 screws, and then the camera will slide right onto the mount, and then plug it in and you're good to go. Setting up the camera is really easy because it works on Wi-Fi, and it's got dual frequency Wi-Fi, which is going to give you a more stable connection. And also the app is very user-friendly, which is important to me trying to figure something out for the first time. So the camera has 5 megapixel ultra high HD recording, and that means that you're going to get a very high clarity when you're recording, which is a very detailed video. One of the coolest features of the camera is its AI tracking. So it will follow a person or an object. It has 355-degree tracking and 100-degree tilt. The camera also comes with 12 spotlights, and that technology allows you to get full color images even when the light is very low. The videos can be stored on an SD card inside the camera. If you use the app like I do, it can be sent to your phone. You'll get a notification that there is movement if you have it set up that way. And with the video encoding technology, it can save you up to 50% of storage space. So make sure that you guys go check out the Treat Life security cameras. I will leave the link down in the description below. Okay, let's talk about this bathroom. I still do like this bathroom a lot. I just want to change things up in here for a few different reasons. Like, I love how this little accent wall looks that I did, but it collects dust like crazy. So if I did it again, I would probably do it vertical instead of horizontal, or just clean it more, but it definitely collects dust. So I want to remove that. And we're gonna be painting. I'd really like to replace this countertop. It's just seen better days. It's pretty scratched up. And possibly a new light, just a little bit more in this room. I think we can have more fun in here because it's a half bath, so we can add a lot more personality to this space. But it still needs to be cohesive with the rest of my house because it's right here off of the dining room. And so you're gonna be able to see it standing in the kitchen. So it needs to go with the rest of the house, but we can give it its own little personality. About a month ago, I asked you guys to give me your opinions on design. I designed 2 separate designs for this room. One was with a wallpaper and some board and batten, and the other was just like a darker, moodier paint color. But one thing that stayed the same between the 2 designs that I know that I definitely want to do is I want to add some wood planks to the ceiling and some beams. I think it will really warm up this space and won't be super expensive to do because this room is like less than 6 feet by 6 feet. So the first thing that I need to do is take some official measurements in here so I can make my list of materials that I need to do the ceiling planking. Most of the time you guys just see me do projects, you see me actually doing the work, but there's a lot more that goes into it before I ever get started. So I've decided that I'm going to start including that stuff more, just to be more realistic about the timeline and what it takes to get this project done if you're wanting to do it in your own space. So all I've done so far is design on my computer, but I need to take measurements and plan everything out, go to the store, get the supplies before I ever get started putting a board on the ceiling. This is kind of my flat 2D drawing here. These will be the planks here that I'm going to be doing out of plywood. And if I do each one of them about 5 inches, I should be able to get 14. We'll have a little bitty gaps right here in between each plank. So those will have 14, and then these will be our 1x6 beams. So they'll be actually 5.5 inches wide. So if the door's right here, windows over here, that's how it will look when you're looking up. And based on the measurements that I have, I am able to make a supply list. So now it's time to run to the store and get everything that I need. My first stop was Lowe's, which is pretty much my second home at this point. And I have a pretty good stock of stain, but I was out of this Minwax weathered oak color, so I wanted to pick up some of that. And this is what I spend the most time doing when I'm gathering supplies. That is making sure that I am getting straight boards. It makes such a big difference whenever you're trying to do a project. If your boards are straight, it will make everything go so much smoother. Lowe's didn't have the plywood that I needed, so I headed over to Home Depot and I had them rip the sheets of plywood into about 15 inches. That way I could cut it myself on the table saw and know that my dimensions were going to be correct, but it just made it easier to have it in a smaller width. And then I got home and unloaded everything into the garage. Okay, this is the point where I would normally start the video, where I would already have my supplies and already have a plan and just start cutting and building. So a lot goes into it beforehand. And what I want to do now is take these boards that we got from Home Depot. This is the 1/4 inch plywood. These are going to be our planks for the ceiling, and I want to rip these down to a tiny bit less than 5 inches because I had them ripped at 15 inches. So I have to account for the width of the saw blade, so just a tiny bit less than 5. After I got all of my wood cut, I wanted to give it a really good sanding. I ended up sanding all of these with a 120 grit. 220 grit sometimes can almost be too smooth when you're staining. It's like the wood doesn't accept the stain super well. So I ended up just using the 120 grit, and I think that worked out perfectly. So I'm also going to be constructing beams, and this is how I'm going to do that. I have 1x4s on each side, and then I will have a 1x6 that will sit on top of that. This is called a butt joint. I'm not mitering. Once I nail with my nail gun, it will look seamless. You really won't be able to tell that it's not one solid piece, especially because it's going to be high up in the air, and it's much simpler, much quicker and easier to do.
After I got both of the beams constructed, I went ahead and gave those a good sanding just to make sure that they looked seamless, to make sure there wasn't a lip sticking out on any of the sides. And then it was time to start staining. I am using a conditioner here. It's oil-based because I am using an oil-based stain. It's really important with a wood like pine because it can end up pretty splotchy. And then I'm going in with my stain, and the color that I'm using here is Provincial. I ended up doing 2 coats because I wanted it to be a rich, darker, deeper color. I let everything dry overnight, and the next morning I decided to add a coat of weathered oak, and that's kind of a gray tone. It's going to make the stain a tiny bit less warm, and I let that dry out in the sun for a few hours, and then it was time to install the planks. I'm using my brad nailer and 1-inch brad nails, and I am just lining the board up and then shooting some nails kind of not straight up into the drywall. These boards are very, very light. It doesn't need tons of nails to hold them in. So I'm just shooting them kind of diagonally, so hopefully they will lock better into the drywall. And then I was painting the little gap in between each board before I put the next board, but I quickly became impatient with that and decided, oh, I'll just go later and paint the gap in between. And that was a terrible idea because it was super tedious to take a tiny paintbrush and put the brown paint in between the gaps. So paint it before you put up the planks. But I'm using a little plastic ruler that I have as a spacer. I'm not gonna lie, it was kind of hard because I needed more hands. It would have been easier with 2 people. So I'm using the ruler as a spacer and just making sure that there's a tiny little gap in between each board and then shooting the nails in. I did that all the way until I got to the vent for the air condition, and then I removed that and I'm going to spray paint it so it blends in with the ceiling a little bit better. I needed to cut one of the boards with my jigsaw to accommodate the air conditioned vent. So I was doing that and everything was going great until the board just broke in half. And I started to panic a little bit, but then I realized it didn't matter because that little small skinny section was going under the vent, so it would be covered. So I'm just able to finish cutting it completely, and I can attach the 2 pieces separately and it'll look seamless because it's covered by the vent and you will never know.
All right, I got all of the planks up on the ceiling, and now it's time to add the beams going across. So here's the beams that we built. They're hollow on the inside, and I ripped down a 1x6 to be the perfect width to fit inside of this beam. So that acts as a cleat. And so whenever we put the beams up, the beam will wrap around the cleat and we can nail that.
The beams are made of a lot thicker material than these planks, so they are a lot heavier. They cannot be held in with just brad nails. So because the joists of the first floor are running like from the top of the screen to the bottom of the screen, I am able to get a screw in each of the joists through this cleat, making it completely secure into a joist. So whenever I added these beams, then I can brad nail the beams to the cleat because the cleat is secured into the studs. I hope that makes sense, but that's definitely the way to do it so it's secure and you don't ever have to worry about it falling. So they were a tight fit. I had to hit them with my mallet. Thank goodness I had my husband there to help me because I was planning on doing this myself, but it was so much easier with two people doing it together. And then after that was done, I was able to just put the air condition vent cover back on, and the ceiling was looking really good at this point.
Okay, the ceiling is mainly finished. I did create some damage banging it in, like some damage on the drywall, but I designed them because I wanted it to be like very tight. The beams, I didn't want gaps on either end. I wanted it to be very tight. So I knew I was gonna mess up the drywall a little bit, but I'll repair that. Also, the edges are not absolutely perfect. So I am going to be putting a piece of trim all along here in between the beams because the room is not square. So it's like all the way to the end over here, but then there's a gap right there. So I'm going to be putting some trim along here just to make it look clean, but that will be in another video because before I do that, I want to do whatever we're going to be doing to these walls, and then the trim will be the finishing piece. And this is where we're gonna stop for today's video. Feeling good about the progress that I've made so far. Still have a lot more that I want to do in here. So make sure that you guys are subscribed, and I will be back next week with another video, and I will see you guys then. Bye.